Alright, everybody, what's up? Today we're going to talk about weird intersections of philosophy and religion. A guy called James Lindsay. He was on the Gonzalo Lira Roundtable, and he has this pet peeve about Gnosticism that I don't hear that term mentioned very often outside of one of my friends who is Eastern Orthodox Christian, and on occasion in Alan Watts' lectures. And so this James Lindsay character was on about the hidden hand of Gnosticism, how this idea that you could transform the world, transform reality, was at the root of all of our ills. And I thought, well, Gnosticism is really a very vague term, and that's why he's able to basically make it into Satan. And that's a very, very funny intersection of religion and philosophy. When you have somebody that's obviously, well read and has an analytical mind, what they tend to do with it is use it to find very intricate patterns. Like, we're all pattern seeking, but the more intellectual capacity you have and the more diligence you have to cultivate that, the more patterns you're going to see. And I think it also lends it to being a mistake. For instance, like, somebody might make something of this headband I'm wearing. Rather than, I just wanted to wear something pastel and awful because it came in a pack of, I really just wanted to buy a bunch of, like, black and gray ones. But, they had these. I thought, this is kind of fun. I'm comfortable with my masculinity enough to wear something girly. But what some people might think is it's some kind of, like, symbolic thing, some kind of spiritual. For instance, speaking of Gonzalo Lira, it was either in the comments section or something, somebody mentioned his hat is orange, and that because he has an orange hat, because Freemasons wear orange hats to denote some kind of thing, that means that Gonzalo Lira is a Freemason. And that means other things that imply bad things about Gonzalo Lira. And, the colors in Orthodoxy, as I suppose also in Protestant circles, denote certain cycles of the liturgy. So yeah, there can be spiritual significance to it, but again, the weird intersections. So what people will find these patterns and they'll read into them, and even something as mundane as a color will then connect to this world of wrong. And the problem to me about this criticism, why I find it worthy commenting on, is when I was going to services at an Orthodox church, and even generally, not even within the context of church, people would talk about this new selfish era that we're experiencing. And they'd say it's the era of the self, and it's about changing the world for the better. And you can't change the world for the better. You have to basically suffer with it as it is. It's a very kind of like neo-Catholic ideation, or rather, it's not even intrinsic to Catholicism. It's a perversion of Catholicism. This need to suffer, right? So when people are talking about, Gnosticism's problems that wants to transform the world and basically thinks it can do it through either magic or philosophy or communism, and all of these things are just, unnatural and weird and wrong and against the order that God, in the case of these analysts, that's their opinion of who put them into place and who are we to question it. Well, it says in the Bible to focus, like, whatever is good, meditate on it. It's in one of the virtues out there. And I think it's whatsoever is lovely, whatsoever is good, meditate on these things, yada yada. That's the gist of it. And you also find, correlation between these things in a lot of religions. Like, again, this Falun Gong thing, which I think that they brought up during this discussion with Gonzalo Lira at this roundtable. Basically, I went to look it up because it was also said to be connected to a newspaper I subscribe to, the Epoch Times, and it just sounds kind of like a copy of the Beatitudes. Let's look at the what is Falun Gong, website, Falun Info, Dafa Center, yada yada, blah blah blah. What is Falun Gong? Falun Gong combines meditation and gentle exercises, similar to yoga or Tai Chi, with a moral philosophy centered on the tenets of truthfulness, compassion, tolerance, or in Chinese Zen, Shan Ren. Falun Gong practitioners aspire to live by these principles in their daily lives. In traditional Chinese culture, the process of perfecting and refining mind and body is called cultivation. Our modern language uses the word qigong to describe it. And so, basically, let's see, where did it go to where it really sounded like they were talking about the Beatitudes? Yeah. At the core of Falun Gong's teachings are the values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Ancient Chinese schools of thought emphasize that seeking harmony between heaven, nature, and men can bring stability and prosperity to society. Similarly, for a person on a spiritual path, aligning with the guiding principles of the universe, the Tao, or the Way, and assimilating to its qualities can bring greater mental and physical health, blessings, and different levels of spiritual awakening. Okay, so basically, this states outright that there's an objective truth, the Tao, which, Wu concept, but yeah, and you're supposed to seek it out and bring yourself in accordance with it, which, again, if I looked up this guy, whatever his name was again, yeah, somebody. Why can't I see his name anymore? He's such a common name, like it escapes me anyway. But he's writing all of this anti-neo-Marxian thing, etc. And his main thing is that this whole website is about objectivity. The Calamity of Scientific Gnosticism by James Lindsay. There it is. There's his name. And it's all about new discourses pursuing light of objective truth in subjective darkness. So, well, the light of the objective truth in the definition of the Falun Gong would be the Tao. But again, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, in the course of a conversation with Zala Lira, he said that, Confucianism and Tao is all this weird stuff and it's all connected to this Gnosticism. And it's like, okay, dude, I don't know. It's good if you're trying to practice Christianity in a pure sense to avoid syncretism, but then there's also in Romans where it said that, there's those that don't know Christ, but then they live according to their moral guiding system, which in the end might actually, be bring them salvation, despite the fact that they don't know what you know. And furthermore, there's this thing about perfecting that when I was going to a Protestant school for high school, that they were talking about, you can't become perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. Only God is perfect. Right, that's understandable. But be perfect as I am perfect is also in the Bible. So a lot of this analysis is kind of the mirror image of the deconstruction that's done by this thing that they hate, which is postmodernism. And that's why there is this weird, I'm titling this video, the weird intersection, interplay of religion and philosophy. And that's food for thought, and I want to get more into depth with it as I have the time. But definitely interesting views presented here that are rehashing of things that I've heard over and over again by this gentleman, James Lindsay. But yeah, I just think it's a little bit wacky, and I don't think it's accurate, and I'm going to go into more details of why I don't think it's accurate way of describing the world, and it's not even really good for Christian praxis. And yeah, but this is just one permutation of this phenomenon of the interplay of religion and philosophy. And I mean, those things, of course, Also tied to science, because some people view science as a faith too, because they're like, you gotta believe the science, completely missing the point that science has nothing to do with belief. Science has to do with being a method of approximating to the best of your ability a repeatable pattern. That's it. It's like something that establishes the realness of a phenomenon via experimentation, via repetition, and then of course there's more of a theoretical framework. It can get a little bit more abstract than that, where you have proofs and then frameworks that enter into it. But by and large, it's not, you can't trust the science, believe in the science. I don't know why this has to be said, but apparently it does. You have to do science and then say, well, I see where you're coming from, here's where you might be wrong. Now, the person that hears me say this may say, well, then there's people that then say that yada yada yada. I gave them all this evidence and they're still, willy-nilly claiming that their wacky idea is correct and my perfectly reasonable idea isn't. Well, I frankly, in a lot of these issues, I have not seen it being that concrete. It's whatever they might believe, whether they're pro-global warming, being anthropogenic or anti, or whether they think that, the vaccines for the current thing are bad or good. They both appeal to science and say, you don't trust the science. And there's more or less on each side evidence that is good. Some of the wackier conclusions on the side of the anthropogenic, obviously wrong, been disqualified. And on the fact that, the vaccines are not only good, obviously disqualified. But then you have people going in the other direction, and they're both saying, believe the science. Well, it's not a matter of belief, it's a matter of honing in on what's true. And that's a process. And that again, like, if you keep on harping against the perfecting that we can, that there is such a thing as progress, at least in terms of coming from where we are as fallible beings and getting rid of those flaws, whether through a deeper relationship with the Jesus Christ and the church or what have you, you can't just poo-poo that. That's weird. So that's one of the reasons, like, I wanted to make this, because there is this big mesh of craziness, because people are reaching for patterns to point they need a Satan. And whether or not Satan exists, if you imagine him, it, evil, or whatever, as a kind of a sneaky phenomenon, you might miss the real Satan, is what I'm saying. So that's why you have to be very, very careful with these things, with this interplay of religion, philosophy, science, reality, the whole shebang. I mean, golly. Alright, I've rambled on enough. I've been awake for a very, very long time. Thanks so much for listening. Take care now.